Okay, today we're going to talk about Chapter 7, the Ancient Greeks, and specifically today we'll do 7:1. All right, so Greece is going to be a civilization, the first one that's going to develop in Europe and Western Asia. Remember, the other four civilizations we've been talking about have all been river valley civilizations. And this one is going to actually you'll see it's in the map there, the Balkan Peninsula, in the southern part of the Balkan Peninsula. Vocab word peninsula is a piece of land that juts out and surrounds by water on three sides. Okay, so that's the main part. That's called mainland Greece. But also on the, you can see they are around the coast all the way over in on the map there. It says Asia Minor. It was also called Anatolia at that point, which is nowadays part of Turkey. Okay, and so then of course it's also going to have all the islands there in the middle in the Aegean Sea and Crete at the bottom. So this is going to be a different kind of lifestyle. They're obviously going to be basing it on sea life a lot, right? So fishing, trade. Of course, they're still going to farm. They're going to farm along the coasts or in between the mountains where it's fertile plains and in between. And they're going to grow things that grow well in that kind of soil. So wheat, barley, olives, grapes. The animals they raise are also going to be ones that can deal with that. So um, sheep and goats. And because of the mountains, many of them, the little civilizations or communities that grow, are going to be very independent from each other and kind of think of themselves as like separate little countries rather than one big country. Greece is actually a name that's going to develop a little bit later. Okay. All right. So here at first, we need to talk about the very first group of people, the Minoans. So the Minoans lived on the island of Crete, which is to the southeast there. You can see it's purple on this map. Okay. And we know about them obviously from archaeologists studying and finding. There's a famous palace at Knossos that they did a lot of research, and the famous king there of that palace, which is where they get their name, the Minoans from Minos. Okay, and so we learned a lot about them. This is the very first people, as far as we can tell. They're not Greeks. Okay, and they do not last. They date them from about 2,500 to about 1450 BC. And we know that they were a trade community, obviously being on an island, so they're going to build boats. They have oak and cedar trees on the island that they can build from, and they are going to go and trade. Obviously, being on an island, they're going to need to do that. So they go and they trade with Egypt and Syria, and they had patrols that they would have in their area of the sea to make sure that they were safe from pirates so they didn't lose their trade. And then, like I said, they didn't last, and we're not exactly sure why this civilization collapses, but we have a couple theories. First of all, there is evidence that there was maybe some earthquakes. Undersea, of course, is going to cause huge waves, and maybe that's what destroyed the cities. Also, there's also a good thinking that the Mycenaeans came in and invaded, and we're going to talk about that group of people next. So we're not exactly sure, but for whatever reason, this civilization ends up going away. All right, so let's talk about the Mycenaeans. So the Mycenaeans were actually people who were originally from outside, and they came to Greece from Central Asia about 200 BC or so. And we have evidence again, archaeologists that have found another palace here, and we know that the kings lived up on a palace, up on a hill, and they built these thick stone walls around to protect everyone. And we know that they had the nobles who lived on large farm estates. And of course, they wouldn't work them themselves, so they'd have workers or slaves who worked the land. And these really large estates would have farmlands, but then they have like basically like a little town or village, right? That the other people, the workers, would live in on the noble's estate, okay? And we know that, of course, we know they have quite good artisans, leather goods, and things were found in the palace. Um, we know that they kept records. Um, of course, usually the record keeping starts from trade, right? And keeping stock of what like wealth you have. So they would, know how many livestock they have, and they'd pay their like taxes in wheat, either livestock or honey, actually, was one of the things they could pay it in. Okay, and they had a really proud military. They were also very proud of how they did in the Trojan War. And again, this one also, we believe that they're the ones who conquered the Minoans. They had learned a lot from the Minoans, and they had built ships and things after learning it from the Minoans, and also how to work with bronze. And so they borrowed a lot from the Minoans, and then we think that maybe they're the ones who actually went and conquered them. This mask is actually a famous mask that was found called the Mask of Agamemnon. And it's a gold funeral mask, meaning they would put it over the face of the dead body, right? And they found this here in Mycenae. So anyway, so they also this civilization ends up declining by about 1100 BC. And again, we think it's from the different kingdoms fighting, and then also evidence of earthquakes. So we're not exactly also sure, but we think it's a combination of those things. All right, and then the Dorians is another group we need to talk. Now they came in from the north, and they come in and they invade and take over. And while they are in control, unfortunately, it's considered a dark age. So dark ages are marked by a time of the economy goes down. In this time period, trade is way down, and so of course economics are way down, and most people are very poor, barely surviving just to feed their family. Okay, so they don't have access for trade. Because of course the trade is down, there's a less writing happening, right? Because original writing is more about record keeping than for literature and things. So during a dark age, not only is the economy bad, you also do not see any arts and things. There's less of the arts and literature and things like we talked about in the opposite, right, of golden ages. Okay, they did have some advancements during this time. They did learn iron weapons and tools, right, and bringing that information to Greece, teaching everyone how to make iron weapons, and knowing that these tools are stronger and cheaper than the bronze that the Mycenaeans had used is going to be a positive or an advancement. And a lot of people, the Greeks, they weren't actually called Greeks yet, but the people in this area were not liking the Dorian rule. And so actually a lot of them left mainland, and they went to the islands or to Anatolia. Okay. And so what happens is after a fair amount of time, so now we're like at 750 BC, descendants of those original people who were from the mainland decide they're going to come back and move back to the mainland. And it's during this time when they come back and they're bringing all their new ideas and crafts and skills that they get this new name of Hellenas. Okay, Hellenas is its meaning, that's where Greek comes from. So these people are going to increase trade again. They are also doing well financially. The farmers are able to make a surplus, right, which means they're going to go trade. They trade again with Egyptians and Phoenicians, and we talked about the Phoenicians and how they had an alphabet and how it was spread through trade. So at this point that the Hellenas are going to adopt that alphabet, and they make a Greek alphabet that's 24 letters, and it really greatly simplifies reading and writing. So you see an increase in writing, And they a lot of what they did at first was to take the tales they already had, which were oral stories that were told by the bards. A bard is a storyteller. Sometimes they would do it to music, kind of sing their story, which is what the picture is showing. Um, and they would now write these down, those stories down, okay? And so we get those epic poems and stories about heroes and things starting to get written down. Okay, all right, so then we go through a population increase. So as we've come out of the bad times of the Dorians, right, the Dark Age, and things are getting better, now the population is getting so big that actually they can't feed the people. And so they need to actually get more farmland to produce more food. So their solution to this is to go out and get new colonies. So they go out and spread Greek culture. This is around 750 to about 550 BC. The Greeks are going to spread through southern Italy and France and Spain and northern Africa and Western Asia. So they're all spreading around, right, and getting these colonies. And the colonies would then trade with their what they call parent colony or parent city, okay? And so they were able to get in more grains and fish and metals that they didn't have, and timber, right? Enslaved people. And then the Greek area, the Hellenes, they would then trade the things that they had a lot of, like olive oil or wine, some pottery, okay, things like that. All right, and so and turns out that the colonies then could specialize. So, for instance, if they were an area that had a lot of sheep, right? The sheep farmers, some of them started specializing in making a cloth from the wool, right? And so then you get these specializations that start to happen. Okay, and so they are spreading out and trading quite a bit. And so then this is the beginning of starting to use coins. The Greek coins are actually trading metal, which is valuable, right, instead of bartering for things. And so that makes it much easier to trade. And it's going to, obviously, coins are still around today. And in fact, you'll see quite a bit of similarities. Our coins today, right, usually have someone's likeness on it and a few words that are important to them, just like the Greeks would back then. All right, city-states. So after the Dark Ages, the nobles started overthrowing the kings that had been in control, and they kind of were their own little king in their own little independent area. And so this is the beginning of city-states, okay? City-states are often, that's what we call them, but really it was called a polis, okay? A polis is a town or a city, something like that, and the surrounding area, so the farmland that goes with it. So you can see that word, the Greek word, in a lot of what we have today, like politics or police, right? Those are all coming from this root. And so all the city-states weren't exactly the same. However, they kind of had a lot of similarities. So I have Athens up here as an example. Most of them had a similar look. So for one thing, they picked an acropolis, which is a hilltop, and they would put a fort up there for protection, and then some of their temples, and they each had a different god or goddess that there was like their their main god, but they of course believed in many gods. And then also at the bottom would be an open market, and they would call that was called the agora. And it wasn't just a market, it was also places to meet and debate and have politics. All your voting and choosing officials and debating and all that kind of things happened where there's a big open area for everyone to come and kind of hang out. Okay, so that was the agora. The citizens are much different than in the other places we've studied so far. So in many of the other original civilizations, they were like completely controlled, right, by their emperor or king. And they honestly kind of believed they should be, right, because they thought it was a god often, right? Um, so in this is a much different situation. The citizens are having more say, right? They thought that all free men who were land owning and born in the polis were automatically a citizen, and with that citizenship, you had some requirements. Okay, you were supposed to be an active citizen in the government, so that means vote, hold office. You could defend yourself in court. You had certain rights as a citizen. But you also had responsibilities. You were supposed to fight in the citizen soldier army, right? Um, so to protect your city state, if there are conflicts with other city states, you would voluntarily go and fight to protect them. Okay. All right. By the way, women, of course, don't have those rights, even if they're born and everything. And some city states did get rid of the land requirement too. All right. So, what does a citizen army look like? Well, if you're wealthy, you're going to have advantages, right? You'd have a horse you could bring or a chariot you could drive. A lot of the citizen armies were these foot soldiers. They're called hoplites. Hoplites they would all have a round shield, a short sword, and a spear, and they would march in a formation called a phalanx. A phalanx is this idea that they're really close together, like shoulder to shoulder, and they would do that, and they'd march together because they could protect themselves and each other, like by having the shields right next to each other. It's harder for them to come in and stick a spear in, right? And they can use it to protect. And then also, if there's arrows coming, right, then they could all raise their shields all at the same time on cue, right, and kind of make like a little roof for themselves and protect from a barrage of arrows coming in. So the hoplites are the soldiers, and the phalanx is the formation. Okay.